Whenever compiling any list, it is first worth considering what is the criteria for inclusion. Well, for this episode, one criteria was that the films will all be from the 20th century. But should the films be limited to only those that feature trans people, either from real life or fictional characters? If that was the criteria, then this episode would be rather short. Therefore, the majority have cisgender actors portraying either a real life individual or a fictional character, and one does not feature any trans characters at all, but is still an important trans film, and another is kind of fun. Spoilers are a risk with any film discussion, and I will endeavour to alert possible spoilers. Therefore, to avoid any chance, I have listed in order all the films in the description, except for the ones I consider problematic, which are at the end of the list, as even their title may be triggering. So perhaps come back to this episode after seeing all the films you have not seen and want to watch before hearing my opinion of them. Welcome to Transwise Transstrong. I am Caroline O'Reilly. Episode 7, Celebrating Trans Films, Part 1. Where to start? Well, perhaps with someone who embraced trans people, Andy Warhol, and their 1971 produced, Paul Morrissey directed Women in Revolt, which starred three trans women, Jackie Curtis, Candy Darling and Holly Woodlawn. Jackie Curtis and Candy Darling had previously been in Paul Morrissey's 1968 Flesh, and Holly Woodlawn in their 1970 Trash. The film was the last one produced at Andy Warhol's factory in Manhattan and was portrayed as a satire on the women's liberation movement. But given that the women's liberation movement was fighting for the injustices that women then faced, I wonder what was Paul Morris's intent with the film, or his attitude to female empowerment. However, given that it starred three trans women, whereas even today a film with even a single trans woman or trans man is a rarity, I feel it should be included with a strong caveat regarding its tone. From 70s America to 1978 West Germany, and the German language Rainer Werner Fassbinder film In a Year of 13 Moons. Even if one was generous, celebration could hardly apply to this film. I admit I have not seen it, but I would say from reviews it would be a tough watch, and spoiler alert, it follows the main character Elvira, who, after gender-affirming surgery, faces an increasingly harrowing response from society. Therefore, perhaps one should consider it more as a particular late 70s window on society's attitude towards transgender people, and unlike Women in Revolt, the trans woman character Elvira was portrayed by a cisgender man. I think we could do with a laugh after In a Year of 13 Moons, and staying in the 70s, 3 years earlier in 1975, there was the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The Rocky Horror Picture Show was based on the stage musical The Rocky Horror Show, which was written by Richard O'Brien, who British audiences may know from the 1990s Channel 4 show The Crystal Maze, which they hosted. The film starts with a wedding, and shortly afterwards the car of a newly engaged couple, Susan Sarandon's Janet and Barry Bostwick's Brad, breaks down, and they seek help at a mansion where they meet Dr. Frankenfurter, portrayed by Tim Curry. Yes, another cisgender man. I think you may begin to see a pattern in the casting. Dr. Frankenfurter self-describes as a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania and whose sexuality is either bisexual or pansexual. The film was not a financial success when first released, but with midnight showings became a cult that over time made back its money and was notable for its audience participation, with the audience singing along and during the wedding scene throwing rice and also dressing up as characters from the film. The original stage musical has also continued to be staged, with a variety of performers taking the lead role of Dr. Frankenfurter, who, to put it mildly, could hardly be described as an accurate reflection of a trans woman. However, that cisgender men dress in a corset and stockings as Dr. Frankenfurter, whether attending the stage version or a showing of the film, I feel it is a kind of trans visibility. And although in the film and possibly all stage versions, cisgender men portray Dr. Frankenfurter, in 2016 there was a remake for television, the Rocky Horror Picture Show Let's Do the Time Warp Again, where Dr. Frankenfurter was portrayed by a trans woman, the actress Laverne Cox. A new decade saw the release in 1982 of The World According to Garp, where John Lithgow, again a cisgender man, portrayed a former footballer who is a trans woman, Roberta Muldoon, who lives in the home of Garp's mother, which is also a home for abused women. Lithgow's portrayal of Roberta and how their character is treated is positive, which was not usually the case for a mainstream film then. However, although a comedy drama, the film does nonetheless have a number of powerful scenes reflected in its 15 rating in Britain and R rating in America. I'll try to be circumspect describing one scene from the film, but it is a bit spoilery. There is an event that Garp wants to go to, but all men are excluded. Therefore, they dress as a woman, and Roberta, who is invited, helps them to attend. So consider this: a film, albeit based on a novel, has a scene where all men are excluded, yet Roberta Muldoon, a trans woman, is invited. That shows a level of inclusion that in 21st century Britain and America is so sadly lacking in many areas of life. From fiction to factual, and from the last decade of the 20th century comes a documentary, 1990's Paris is Burning, which captured the bull cultural competitions of the African American, Latino, gay and trans communities of New York City from the mid to the late 80s. This period was when the bull cultures were at its height, and the film examines attitudes to gender, sexuality, race and class during this time, and the competitive aspects of the balls, where the contestants were judged on dance, clothing and ability to pass as the gender they were portraying. The ability to pass is an aspect that some would apply to trans people, although more likely trans women, and frankly it is only a small step from judging if a trans woman passes to full-on transphobia. Whether a trans woman or a cisgender woman, a trans man or a cisgender man, we should all be accepted as just women or men. And now I will step off my soapbox and return to Paris is Burning. The film combined footage of the balls and interviews with their leading figures, such as Pepper the BJ, Dorian Corey, Angie Extravaganza and Willie Ninja. Trophies were awarded, and many of the contestants belonged to a house which was led by a mother with the goal of winning for the house. Drag was shown not just as performance but encompassing the diversity of gender, race, and class, and was a way the performers asserted their individuality. The film could also lay claim for being the first to present voguing. 4 years later saw a release of a film that brought drag performance as well as another trans woman character to a wider audience. It was 1994's The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. It starred as drag queens Hugo Weaving as Anthony Tick Belrose, whose alter ego was Mitzi Del Bra, and Guy Pearce as Adam Whiteley, whose alter ego was Felicia Jollygoodfellow, and Terence Stamp as a trans woman, Bernadette Bassinger, and was based on 3 real-life drag queens. To be honest, if one was to draw up a list of actors to portray a trans woman, I don't think I would have placed Terence Stamp at the top of the list, but having recently watched the film, I very soon totally believed in their character, which didn't come as a surprise, as Stamp is a great actor. Another spoiler alert, although given this is set out from the beginning of the film, it is only a minor one. The trio set out to travel across Australia's outback to perform their drag act at a hotel casino resort, and along the way not everyone is accepting. And who was Priscilla? Well, if you have listened to episode 6, The Kings and Queens of Drag, you will already know the answer. It is the bus. A film that was a powerful portrayal of a young transgender girl, Ludo, was the Franco-Belgian French language film Ma Vie en Rose, released in 1997, which follows their travails. This is a bit spoilery. The film begins with Ludo's family moving into a new house, and the community initially welcomes them. But an innocent action by Ludo leads to hostility from the community, and there is also a lack of understanding regarding their gender identity from within their family. Later, they move to a new home, and Ludo goes to a dress-up birthday party and encounters a trans boy, and events leads to Ludo being hurt. There are a number of emotional scenes in the film, but ultimately it is a positive trans representation. In Britain it was rated 12, suitable for 12 years and over, whereas in America it was rated R, which, given there was hardly any sexual content or violence and the language was mild, one might suspect a degree of transphobia on the part of the MPA, who rate US films. Although this is a celebration of trans films, I feel it's worth discussing films that are problematic, which will inevitably include spoilers, and as even their title could be triggering, I recorded the next section before recording this introduction so as to time its length. Therefore, if you wish to avoid, please mute or fast forward the next 6 minutes and 38 seconds. And I'll see you on the other side, starting now. The first is Neil Jordan's The Crying Game, which, although not a UK success due to Miramax, damn, even the name of the production company is now triggering. Marketing it as a sexy noir thriller, it was a great hit in America. This was due to Miramax's marketing campaign that made the gender identity of Jay Davison's character a plot twist, and it is how another character initially responds is why I have a major issue with this film, although that same character's attitude changes later in the film. Also, consider when this film was released, 1992. 10 years after the positive acceptance of a trans woman in the world, according to Garp. Therefore, there was no excuse. The film also received 6 Oscar nominations, with 1 win, Neil Jordan, for their screenplay, and 7 BAFTA nominations, again with 1 win for Outstanding British Film of the Year. So, with a combined Oscar BAFTA total of 13 nominations, it seems transphobia pays. And remember that marketing campaign in the US? Well, at the Oscars, Jay Davidson was nominated for an Oscar as an actor in a supporting role, and similarly nominated at the BAFTAs as a supporting actor. Whoops! Next, if any film could be summed up in 2 words, the next would be top of the list, and those 2 words are shower scene. And of course, the film is Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 Psycho, considered to be one of his best. The film was based on Robert Bloch's 1959 book of the same name, inspired by real-life serial killer Ed Gein, who was also the inspiration for Tobe Hooper's 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre and part inspiration for The Silence of the Lambs. More anon. The shower scene was a tour de force of cinematography, editing, and music to create in the mind a horror that is never explicitly seen, committed by a character that cross dresses and is a knife wielding bloody psychopath. Well, thanks, Alfred, for putting that image in the audience's mind. From the start of the 60s to the start of the 80s, and director Brian De Palma's 1980 Dress to Kill. I mean, where do you begin? A woman is murdered in an elevator by a blonde woman, who it is subsequently revealed to be the psychiatrist Dr. Robert Elliot, seen earlier in the film, portrayed by Michael Caine. Another psychiatrist, Dr. Levy, explains that Dr. Elliot is transgender and their actions are due to a conflict between their male side and unstable female side represented by Bobby, and this led them to become homicidal. I mean, you just couldn't make up that level of ignorance and transphobia. The film was initially X-rated by the MPAA, now MPA, but was trimmed by 30 seconds to receive an R rating. I think it could have been trimmed a bit further, say 104 minutes. And after that piece of transphobic hate, I sometimes wish I hadn't given up alcohol, as I could do a strong drink right now. But that hateful transphobic idea of a male serial killer dressing up in women's clothing to murder women. I mean, no one now would have that as a plot device, would they? Oh, but back in 2020, J.K. Rowling, under their pseudonym Robert Galbraith, published Troubled Blood. I know book burning is a really bad thing, but sometimes another decade and Jonathan Demme's 1991 Silence of the Lambs, adapted by Ted Talley from the Thomas Harris novel of the same name. This has a serial killer who murders women to use part of their skin to make a bodysuit, and at one point Anthony Hopkins' character, Dr. Hannibal Lecter, states that the serial killer is not a genuine transsexual but believes he is, and the late Jonathan Demme said that the character is not explicitly transgender. So, a psychopathic serial killer who wants to make a bodysuit out of the skin of women, but they are not explicitly transgender? Well, that's all right then. I can't imagine that will create a negative impression of trans people. And staying with the 90s comes the last and very least of films which should be totally avoided, have the negative burn and the ashes buried under 10 tons of concrete. 1994's Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. I will not describe a particular scene towards the end of the film, but just say that it is probably the most disgustingly repellent transphobic scene ever committed to film. And I would consider this film, in terms of its transphobia, to be on par with W.D. Griffiths' silent 1915 film Birth of a Nation, notable for, oh yes, reviving the Ku Klux Klan. And welcome back if you needed to avoid the last section. And I totally understand after recording it. Did I mention I wish I hadn't have given up alcohol? Oh well, a nice cup of tea will have to do. I seem to remember a fictional character had a thing about tea. And what better way to return to celebrating trans films than one from 1999, which, although it does not overtly feature trans people, was like Blade Runner in 1982, a visual game changer, and one with a subtext that I totally missed at the time. Although, in my defence, I was probably not alone. And in case you haven't guessed already, the film was, of course, The Matrix, directed by Lana and Lily Wachowski. And right from the opening scenes to the amazing bullet time effects, you were asked to consider the meaning of reality itself. I wonder what Rene Descartes, who in 1637 originated the phrase cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, would have responded to an imagined world where even one's thoughts could not be trusted. Lana and Lee said in 2020 that the Len trilogy of films are about being transgender, but the corporate world wasn't ready for an allegory about transgender people. A definite spoiler alert. If their original intent for one character had been allowed, the character of Switch would have been a man in the real world and a woman in the Matrix, and would have left little doubt about the transgender message of the Matrix. Another film from 1999 starred Hilary Swank in the biographical film Boys Don't Cry, where she portrays the life of Brandon Tina, a trans man, and the prejudice they and their girlfriend, portrayed by Chloe Sevigny, experienced. What sets this film apart is its rarity as one featuring a trans man. The film was a critical and commercial success and is a tough watch, reflected in it being rated 18 in the UK, suitable only for adults, and initially NC-17 in the USA, although it was later given an R rating. However, some of those close to Brandon felt the events portrayed in the film were not accurate. At the 2000 Academy Awards, Hilary Swank was awarded an Oscar for, wait for it, Best Actress. So consider this, a cisgender female actor portraying a trans man was awarded an Academy Award for Best Actress. You couldn't make it up. The Oscars are not alone. Most ceremonies still have a variant of Best or Best Leading Actress and Actor, which does not reflect the reality of gender today. Therefore, I feel they would be better called Leading or Best Female or Male Portrayal. Therefore, using the Oscar that Hilary Swank was awarded as an example, they could have been awarded an Oscar for Best Male Portrayal. And we end with another comedy drama, and another from 1999, Pedro Almodovar's Spanish language All About My Mother, whose origin is their 1995 film The Flower of My Secret. The film centers around Manuela Echeverria, portrayed by Celia Roth, an organ transplant coordinator at a Madrid hospital, and following a particular event, resigns from her job and searches for her son's other mother, who is a trans woman, Lola, portrayed by, need I say, a cisgender man, Tony Canto. Later, Manuela meets Agredo, who is an old friend and a transgender sex worker, this time for a change, portrayed by a cisgender woman, Antonia San Juan. The film also explores the impact of AIDS, gender identity, sexual orientation, faith, social stigma, and existentialism. And anyone familiar with Pedro Almodovar's work would not be surprised at the range of areas the film covered. And that tea reference? It's from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Although this episode is a celebration of trans films, I couldn't end it without mentioning a television series that I found hopeful, Supergirl, starring Melissa Benoist. From series 4 until the final 6 series, they had as a main character a trans woman superhero, Nia Nail, codename Dreamer, portrayed by a trans woman, Nicole Maines. Now that is something to celebrate. And if you've enjoyed this episode, perhaps tell a friend. This episode was written and presented by me, Caroline O'Reilly. Thank you for listening. Next time, what are words worth?